Good morning, everyone. So I have recorded again this session. No? I was able to meet some of your classmates, but since we are required to record our discussion for today, because of the intermittent connection experiencing by some of our students, I am recording this and I would be uploading it in our Canvas. So this is methods and modern approaches in teaching. So allow me now to discuss to you some of the important terminologies that you should know in this course. First, of course, teaching. What do you mean when we say teaching? This is a process that facilitates learning. Remember the word facilitates learning. It's not all about the teacher talking. It's not all about the teachers discussing the lesson, but it's all about the teachers facilitating learning. So teaching is also a specialized application of knowledge, skills, and attributes designed to provide unique service, particularly to our students, to meet the educational needs of the individual and the society, considering the standards set by the universities or by the institutions. Then as educators, as specialized in our field of specialization, we should be able to apply the knowledge, the skills, and then the attributes in order for our students to learn or to master the most essential learning competencies or the learning competencies or the lessons that we are discussing. So I have students in Thailand, you have classmates in Thailand, and of course some of you would be students here in the Philippines. So I would be contextualizing all my examples so that at least everybody would be able to relate to this discussion. So let's start with the teaching approach. So since we are talking about methods and modern approaches, it would be better if we discuss the approaches in teaching, particularly our students. So let's start with teaching approach. What do we mean when we say teaching approach? So this is a set of principles or beliefs or ideas about the nature of learning, which is translated into the classroom. So we are talking here about the learning experiences of our students. How do our beliefs and our principles in order for them to learn the subjects or the course that we are teaching them. So that is teaching approach. And later on, there are teaching approaches that I would be discussing to you and some of the examples so that at least you would be able to understand more deeply the meaning of teaching approach. So let's start again by discussing as well teaching strategy. So what do we mean when we say teaching strategy? This is our long-term plan of action designed to achieve a particular goal. So after identifying the particular goal of your subject, you have to have this teaching strategy, your long-term plan in order for you to be able to make sure that the standard you have set would be able to achieve by your students. Okay, this is also a method or the method you use to convey information to your students, the particular method that you would be using in order for you to discuss the lesson or the learning competencies for your students to be able to master the learning competencies or the lesson. Okay, they should be able to understand and they should be able to apply it in real life scenario. Teaching method. So this is now a systematic way of doing something. A while ago, we are talking about teaching strategy, okay, which is a method. But here, the teaching method is very specific in nature. This is now the systematic way of doing things inside the classroom. But as for this setup, this school year, we are talking about online modalities because of this pandemic or this crisis. So teaching method implies an orderly logical arrangement of steps, no, or procedures that you are going to do inside the classroom. The step-by-step process or procedures that you would be using in order for your students to learn or master the lessons that you are discussing or the competencies that you are discussing. So that's teaching method. How about teaching technique? So a while ago, I am talking about approach, and then method, and then strategy, and then this time technique. So these are some of their differences. When we talk of teaching technique, This is now the well-defined procedure that you are going to use in order for you or for the students to accomplish certain tasks or activities or learning experiences that you are asking them to do in the delivery of your lesson. For example, you are teaching mathematics. What are the procedures that the students should do in order for them to accomplish a particular activity or task that you are providing them? So that is teaching technique, a very well-defined procedure for a particular task or specific activities that you are asking your students to do. So these are some of the examples of teaching approach, and I would be discussing each of them one after another. So we have the teacher-centered, learner-centered, comparing teacher-centered to that of the learner-centered approach, the subject matter center, the learner-centered, teacher-dominated, disciplinal, individualistic, indirect or guided, interactive, integrated, collaborative, and direct. So what are the differences among these teaching approaches? So these are teaching approaches. Teacher-centered approach. So of course, by the term itself, we are focusing on the teacher. Teacher is perceived to be the only reliable source of information. No? That only the teacher can give the knowledge, the information, only the teacher can discuss the lesson. So this is actually focusing on the teacher. So the focus here is more of the teacher discussing the lesson, and less would be the participation of the students, less interaction among the students involved in the delivery of the lesson, because the focus here is more of the teacher alone. So we should not be like that. Then learner-centered approach, the focus here is of course premised on the belief that the learner is also an important resource because he or she too knows something and is therefore capable of sharing something. That means they are also knowledgeable persons or individuals that can contribute to the success of the delivery of the lesson. So that means you can involve the students. So the focus here is more of the learners, the students who are actually participating in the delivery of the lesson or in the discussion of the lesson. Subject matter centered approach is actually focusing on the subject matter, of course. It gains primacy over that of the learner. It's anchored on the curriculum design, which prescribes different and separate subjects into one broad field. The focus here actually is more of the subject matter. That means there will be no integration of other subject areas. It's all about focusing on the delivery of the lesson, particularly on the subject matter. Next, interactive approach. Here, there are three things that will be considered. The social interactions, the interaction between the student to student, student to student interaction, and then the student to the teacher interaction, and then the student to the tool or to the materials that you would be asking them to manipulate. Your students, they have to interact with the technology. For example, you would be using technological tools, or for example, activities in the internet. So that's student to the tool. So there are three social interactions that would be considered in the interactive approach. The students interact with the teacher, particularly if they have questions or clarifications. And then they can interact with their classmates. So we are considering here, it could be face-to-face or online, but as of the moment, we are having online because of this pandemic, right? So that is interactive approach. And constructivist approach, from the word itself, it's all about constructing meaning, constructing knowledge, particularly considering the prior experiences of the students. So therefore, you should be asking the students to construct knowledge or construct meaning out of the things that you are discussing them in order for them to think critically. So this is constructivist approach. It's all about focusing or connecting the particular lessons that you are discussing to their prior experiences, and then from their prior experiences, they have to construct knowledge or construct meaning. So constructivist approach. Integrated approach, contrary to subject-centered approach. Here, the teacher connects what she teaches to other lessons within the subject, so that is intradisciplinary. If the teacher considers only within the subject, no, connecting other lessons with the other lessons being discussed within the subject. But if the teacher considers other subject areas, then that would become interdisciplinary. And it could be multidisciplinary if the subject or the lesson being discussed is integrated to two or more subject areas. For example, you are teaching science and then you are using English. No? For example, you are teaching English, but the content is science. You are teaching mathematics, no? But the content is English. So that could also be possible. So integrating one subject area to another. So that is integrated approach. Disciplinal approach limits the teacher to discussing his/her lessons within the boundary of his/her subject only. So that means it's focused only on the discipline that the teacher is discussing, the lessons, and integration to current issues, integration to other subject areas will not be done. So focus only. It's bound on his or her subject only. For example, I'm discussing now methods and modern approaches, particularly focus on this subject, and I am not integrating any other subject areas or any other discipline. Collaborative approach. Now, this is very easy. All of us are very familiar with this approach. It's a group work, collaborative work. So there are many strategies that we can make use in order for us to make sure that our students work together in order for them to do a particular task, to achieve a common goal for them. So this is done collaboratively. They will work collaboratively or cooperatively, like for example, group discussions, team games tournament, student team achievement division, and of course, dyad activities. So those are some of the techniques that we can make use in order for us to have collaborative work, okay, or collaborative approach. So how about indirect or guided approach? The teacher guides the learner to discover things for himself or herself. Here, the teacher facilitates the learning process by allowing the learner to be engaged in the learning process with his or her guidance. So in this approach, the teacher should always be present, okay? Guiding the students if they have questions or clarifications. The teacher is readily available to guide them. In a face-to-face setup, the teacher is always there guiding them, telling them the things that they have to do in order for them to accomplish particular tasks. As of the moment, since we are having online, so the teacher should be there. If you have questions or clarification, you can make use of the chat box, yeah? Or you can unmute your mic and then ask the teachers or your professor for help if there are questions or clarifications. So, but in a classroom setup, for example, if you would be teaching in the future, because I think this is PCP, no, you need to be there, guide the students, give them directions in order for them to accomplish the tasks that you would be providing them or that they are provided. So research-based approach, from the term itself, of course, it should be based on research. Teaching and learning are anchored on research findings. So you would be using the result of the research, but be very careful in choosing research-based approach because it should be contextualized. It should be related to the topics that you are discussing. Because if it's not, then there is a possibility that the approach, no, the teaching technique that you have adopted based on research would not be as effective as techniques, contextualized to a particular subject that you are teaching. What do I mean by that? If you are teaching mathematics, for example, but the research-based approach that you have adopted is not contextualized to a particular level that you are teaching, for example, grade 7, but the research was conducted to grade 10. So there is a possibility that it is not effective. So therefore, what you need to do is to consider first and foremost the generalizability of the approach. Even if it is research-based, but there is a possibility that it's not suitable to the needs of your students. So be very careful with that. So, but that's research-based approach. All you have to do is to look at the approaches which are research-based, effective for a particular field, then you adapt them if possible in your field of specialization, and of course, suitable to the needs of your students. Here, whole child approach, there are many schools using this because it does not only consider the academic needs of the students, but also the social, emotional, the psychological, and of course, the spiritual and the developmental needs of the students. Here, the totality of the students is being considered in order for the approach to become holistic in nature. So that's whole child approach. Metacognitive approach, we are considering here metacognition. Okay? The teaching process brings the learner to the process of thinking about thinking. So metacognition, the students are asked to reflect on how they are thinking. For example, you would be providing them with the particular topic, and then they would be reflecting on how they are going to think about their thinking, reflect on their learnings. So the metacognition is very important in metacognitive approach. The ability of the students to think about how they are thinking. So therefore, the activities should provide the students to think on the ways they are thinking in order for them to do the particular tasks or responsibilities. The task. It is the ability to reflect on what they are doing. So you are making the students reflect on what they are doing. So problem-based, very important, particularly in mathematics. You provide them with the problem, and then the students would read, understand, and analyze the problems. Then sometimes you may ask them to solve the problems. But the problem-based approach focus on the problems being shown to the students, and then it would be the springboard in the delivery of the lesson or in discussing the lessons. Usually, this is actually being used in mathematics, discussing mathematics lessons. The students would be provided with problems, and then the students would be understanding and then analyzing the problems, and then it would serve as a springboard to discuss the lesson. So in summary, in a nutshell, approaches vary in the degree, you don't forget, of teacher and learner engagement. Focus, number of learners involved in the teaching learning process. Here, we can say that the approach is teacher-centered if it is more focused on the teacher. Teacher keeps on discussing. But if, for example, you are involving the learners, then in the delivery of the lesson or the learning experiences, you are providing more activities to the learner, then that is learner-centered approach. It could be, for example, focus. If focus on learner, then that's learner-centered. If the focus is subject matter, then that's subject matter approach. For the number of students involved, if, for example, there are a number of students working together, then that would be collaborative work. But if the activities are being done individually, then that's focus on the individual learner. So remember always that the approaches vary in terms of the engagement of the students, the focus, and then the number of learners involved. So that's all, and thank you. As I have mentioned a while ago to the students who attended our synchronous session, The reflection paper submission is extended until Saturday. So you may still submit the soft copy or the digital copy of your reflection paper via inbox. All you need to do is submit it to my inbox. No, don't be buen suceso. So that at least I would be able to check. You don't need to print the reflection paper. All you need to do is to save in Word file or PDF file and then submit to me via inbox, okay, in our Canvas. Thank you very much and good morning.